Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. My guest today is Simon Schaffer-Goldman, CMO of Case Paper, a family-owned paper merchant that celebrated its 75th birthday. I've had the chance to get to know Simon over the last few years, first as a member of the CMO Club, hey Pete, and more recently as a client of Renegades. In either context, Simon is a rock star, and I know you're going to enjoy listening to this show as much as I am going to have making this show with Simon. So Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you for those very kind words. I appreciate it. I hope some of them are true. But,
well, we'll find out, I guess.
Yes, we will.
Now, I also want to point out that this is the time for Jessica, who's in our audience, to give us a big applause and say, woo-hoo! All right, so we've got the live audience to prove that we are actually doing this show. So, first up, well familiar with the fact that your grandfather, Irving Schaffer, founded Case Paper when he 75 years ago, and then he turned it over to your dad and uncle. Did you imagine in your 20s that you would end up in the family business?
Not at all. Not
Really?
At all. No. Especially when I was sheep farming in New Zealand. I was not thinking
farming in New Zealand.
Yes, I was not thinking about the paper business back then. Yeah.
Well, so what were you thinking about?
Well, I think when we're all in our 20s, we're thinking about how can we change the world, right? How can we conquer the world? What can we do with our lives? And exploring.
When you were in New Zealand, because at one point there were 70 million sheep in New Zealand, and they blew a hole through the ozone layer with all the methane. I understand they've got that crop down to now 15 or 20 million.
Yes, there were much less sheep there.
Yes.
But I got very familiar with them.
Right.
Yes. One named Barney, by the way. Yes.
I don't want to be sheepish about this conversation, but I suspect we should move on to move out of that. So you ultimately, was it your dad who said, hey, Simon, why don't you come join the company?
So actually, my dad never said anything to me. There were other people at Case Paper who asked his permission to come talk to me and recruit me into the company.
Very cool. Okay, so they want you in. Where do you start?
The ground floor, I guess, as ground as you can get at our organization. I started really in the sales department as a grunt, doing a lot of legwork. Developing leads for the salespeople, working on leads, really just fundamental stuff in sales, and learning our sales process from the ground up.
Which is, for your organization, really pretty much that's a critical role. I mean, paper doesn't sell itself.
Absolutely, yes. As much as people might think it's that easy to sell paper, there are some nuances to it.
So before we go on to sort of how you got into marketing, give us a sense. Give us a sense of the scale of Case Paper, because I think paper might not. What you guys do exactly? You don't actually make paper. What do you guys do, and how big are you?
So we actually don't make paper. You're absolutely correct. We do convert paper, and I'll explain a little bit of what that means. So we buy paper from all around the world. We buy paper from anywhere from Finland to Germany to Chile and a lot of mills in North America. We bring it into our facilities where we house large inventories, and we have the machinery to custom convert, custom sizes for both unique applications that we don't think about in our daily lives, but actually the manufacturing of them do require paper to be shipped in unique sizes, and the large inventory to respond quickly to our customers. So that really gives us how we kind of carved out a niche in that marketplace for ourselves.
And how many offices and employees do you have?
So at Case Paper, we have 7 locations, 5 of which are manufacturing around the country, and we have 340 employees.
It's a lot of employees. So a few years ago, how many years have you been sort of in the marketing role?
So I've been in the marketing role for a little over 3 years now.
Right.
And I've been at Case Paper for 9 years.
So, and that's about probably when we met, because you joined the CMO club when you became CMO. And I want to talk about that for a second. You were also in Vistage already. What made you think, what was the reason that you joined the club, and what did that bring to to sort of round out your expertise?
So 5 years ago when I joined Vistage, it was really to get out of my industry bubble. I think we all kind of get sucked into our industries or what we do on a day-to-day. And what Vistage allowed me to do was get with other key executives, COOs, CFOs, and really work together, help each other out, solve problems, and learn from each other. And I think there was a very valuable experience from learning from other people, especially when it's outside your bubble.
Right.
And what the CMO club allowed me to do was also to do the same thing, but now focused just on marketing, not just about leadership and management skills.
And what I really admired about you from the very first time we met is you asked really good questions, you were extremely curious, and I feel like in the last 3 years, you've picked up a lot. I mean, you are obviously a fast learner.
I try to be. I think, some people might be able to relate to this. I did have trouble in school. I did have learning disabilities. So, ironically, I was actually not a fast learner growing up, or at least that's how I was labeled. And now I'm in a position now, and I'm so hungry for information and knowledge and to learn from people that natural curiosity has always been there, but I've really been able to put it to good use the last few years.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. You're curious, and I think in a field like marketing, you have to be. If you stop asking questions and reaching out to other folks and ask how they're challenging, what their challenges are and how they're solving them, you're wasting an opportunity for one, but two, you're probably going to stagnate.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest BS in the world is people saying, well, I know it already, or I know that I know it all, or, even people that claim to be experts about it. I mean, even the experts are constantly learning in their field to be experts. They're not experts and then stop learning. You're only an expert because you're constantly learning in your field of expertise. And so for me, I'll never know it all. And I doubt anybody will ever know it all. So, what are we learning and how are we learning, and finding ourselves in positions to learn. That's what the CMO Club did for me, and that's what some other professional organizations have done for me.
All right, well, Pete Kranick, who's probably listening, is going to be very happy to have heard that.
He's actually here and passed me a $100 bill.
Yeah, exactly. So well, actually, we're going to go see him later, so we'll get him to pay up. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to observe, I thought was interesting, was you and I bonded over EOS. Now, Renegade is a small company. EOS, by the way, is Entrepreneur's Operating System, based on the book Traction. But it's the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and I think you mentioned that Case has 340 employees. That would qualify you at 75 years as not an entrepreneurial organization. Was part of your thinking of using this system because you wanted to be more entrepreneurial?
I think that there was always an entrepreneurial spirit within Case Paper. And so, yes, for me personally, but also we're a paper company. And, I'm very cognizant of the fact that if you're listening to this, when Drew introduced me and it's a paper company, you probably thought of Dunder Mifflin. And I think we can all accept that, and I certainly have accepted that. I've embraced that, as you'll see with some of the marketing that we're doing today. But there's definitely, I forgot the question. So
it's okay, it doesn't matter. It's about being entrepreneurs.
Right. So the EOS process really allowed us to build structure within our organization that was kind of lacking in terms of building some routines, building an architecture that we could kind of build around moving into the future. Because even though we're a 75-year-old company, I would joke to people that we were actually a 75-year-old startup. Like there were functions and departments that people wearing multiple hats 75 years later. And I was like, wow, this is like a startup. You're wearing multiple hats. Everybody's kind of running around. Right. And at some point you need to take a step back and say, we need to build out certain aspects of our business. Right. And there was definitely, including marketing as an example, where there just wasn't a foundation built that was carried through over the years.
Okay, all that was great, but let's get back to Dunder Mifflin. So you must have a story related to The Office. I mean, well, first of all, which role are you in the show?
You know, that's highly debated at Case Paper. My wife doesn't like to call me Jim because then there's assuming there's a Pam at work.
Oh, right.
Wildly uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yes, I bet. Yeah.
And I don't think I'm gruff enough to be Stanley.
Right.
I don't know if I'm eccentric enough to be Dwight. So I'm not really sure who I am in that office. Maybe I'm that kind of new character that showed up at the end that everybody kind of understood, the new Dwight. Maybe I'm the new Dwight.
Yeah. That's funny. Did you meet Dwight when he came to the CMO Club event?
Yeah, so I met Rainn Wilson.
Right.
And funny enough, so we're at a CMO Club event, and Rainn Wilson, who's doing amazing charity work, and I think it's important to recognize that besides his role on The Office, he's doing some really amazing things outside of it. I was lucky enough to meet him out by the water over a beer, and the first thing out of my mouth, I showed him my name tag and my company, and I said, "I'd just like you to know I love you and I hate you." He certainly made my life more interesting when I started at Case Paper, but it actually was that's a great TV show. So I mean, we can all agree, it's a classic, and it will always be a classic.
Exactly.
So I can't fault it there.
All right, perfect. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into your marketing.
Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show.
All right, we're back. My guest is Simon Schaffer-Goldman.
Sounds like a law firm.
I know, it is Simon Schaffer-Goldman. And we're not talking about law, we're talking about marketing. And so a couple of years ago, you decided that you needed some outside help. What was the impetus to sort of look for a partner to get your sort of marketing going? What inspired you to do that?
Well, looking around, stated earlier that we just didn't have a foundation built. So I think there's two aspects of it. One is building an architecture around marketing, the department, and what we saw that to be moving into the future, and then try to cherry pick the key components that were going to kind of be the foundation that we were going to lay everything else on. And so in the very beginning, we knew we had a voice. We've been around 75 years. What do we do with all these great stories and the employee engagement that we have, and how do we corral all of that and harness that to be able to build off of it?
Right. So, and our Renegade, so said, okay, hey, Drew, help us sort of define this thing. And we went through a discovery process together. And there were a couple of things that really struck us as we were doing our discovery. One is sort of the service mentality of the organization, and we'll talk about that. But the other thing was sort of this latent funny bone that was deep in the company. And one of the things that we discovered, and it was one of those wonderful moments that you hope happens when you're doing discovery, is the Printer's Home Companion.
Oh, right.
Talk about that a little bit, because this is just this outrageous thing done in the 60s, I think.
50s and 60s. For about 12 years. So for those of you that don't know and aren't going to be on our website looking at our company history, when we started, we were actually just based in Manhattan. We were in a small converted horse stable in Greenwich Village, and that's where we actually started. And one of the things that we did back then was great branding and great marketing. And we did something called the Printer's Home Companion, which for those of you that like The Onion or some of these kind of more comical news organizations or content that comes out, that's what it was. It took kind of almost stock images And these are all black and white back then.
Right.
And we did these newsletters that were all ridiculous. I mean, they were just really absurd humor.
It really was. It's sort of fractured fairy tales in there. And what it showed to us is there was this deep-rooted sense of humor of not taking yourself too seriously. It was also a wonderful example of content marketing where there was nothing about printing or paper or what you guys did, but I guarantee everybody who opened it would laugh, and it made your brand likable, which is so interesting. And now we get back to the sales thing and sort of think about Aflac Duck for a moment, right? Ridiculous. You really knew nothing about what Aflac Duck, but what it did do, sense of humor, made you likable. So when the salesman knocked on the door, there was some air cover. It said, oh, you're from Aflac, where's your rubber duck? Oh, here's one, okay, let's have a conversation. In some ways, that's what the Printer Home Companion did for your company, 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
It absolutely did. And the stories that I hear from, I don't know, is HR in here? The old timers
yes.
At our company was really that it got so popular that in New York City at that time, printers weren't the only people subscribing it, like asking for it. We were sending it to agencies, ad agencies. Right. I mean, this was really blanketing it because it was so different than what was going on, the marketing that they were used to even back then. And it really set us apart, and it helped us build our brands, our private label brands that really set us apart and drove a lot of both revenue growth and profitability for the organization in those early years.
So seeing that and saying, okay, there is a lot of history of humor. And then in the discovery process, we went, oh my gosh, Simon and his dad, they're kind of into humor too. And oh my God, you have a brother who's a comedian. So you have a lot of, it was in the DNA of the company. So it gave you permission to be different. So that was sort of one big pillar of the brand. The other big pillar of the brand was this extraordinary sense of commitment to your customers. And that came out through a lot of stories that we heard from, and that was whether it was 75 years ago, 50 years ago, 25 or 5 minutes ago, those stories seem to be coming through a lot. Talk a little bit about the culture of the company and the service orientation of the company.
So our customers have always been front and center for us, and really to the point where we would go to extraordinary lengths to support our customers. Back when we were just in New York City, we had slogans, we never keep a press waiting. We had things that were really centered around that we are here for you when you need us. And a lot of times it was when you need us quickly. And so if you think back then, there was no internet, there was no social media. So the printed word, print in general, like that was it.
Right.
And so there was so much activity going on that to be able to respond quickly and to connect with your customers became such a critical point, because back then there might be 50 competitors in New York City. Right. Today there's like 5.
Not so many.
Not so many.
So that's good. But you still have a competitive marketplace. You also have a lot of outside forces, like people are stop sending mailers and a lot of other things that are making the market competitive. So I've talked about on the show a lot with various folks the purpose-driven story statement and the power of one. And what was interesting as we were looking at your brand, you had you have the luxury of the fact that Case paper says, oh, it grounds you in a category. So from a purpose-driven story standpoint, you didn't need to ground them at you in the category. What we needed to do was sort of set an expectation. Mm-hmm. And also for those folks that don't know you, set an expectation that was memorable. So we worked with you to come up with your purpose-driven story statement. Why don't you share it?
So the simple is, we're on the case.
Interesting, on the case. Well, that's kind of cool, case paper on the case. And what did that mean to you initially when you thought about that idea?
So it really summed up in 3 simple words.
Wow, 3 words.
3 words, amazing. And for those of you who don't know, about writing stories and marketing stories or anything in 6-word stories, right? It is an exercise I learned last year through the Stanford Business School program that I did, how to write 6-word stories. Right. So the fact that we did it in 3, I mean, we were just phenomenal in that case. So the on the case really fundamentally got to the heart of what we like to do. And it wasn't even just for our customers or for each other, is how do we step up and not just do something day to day and plod along, but take delight in doing something more for our customers, going that extra mile for them, making that extra phone call, sending that extra email, following up on something that, you know what, I just want to double check to make sure that's right. Those little things build up very, very big relationships with customers that go far beyond the big the big gestures that you can do. Right. It's those small things, and On the Case really encompass not only the big things you do for customers, but really encompass all the little things that it means to be on the case.
And one of the things I remember in that process that within On the Case, we weren't just saying, hey, someone calls you, call them right back, because it was responsible, resourceful, and then there was reliable, I think was the third. But those three things really provided meat to the thing, because it's one thing to just respond quickly. It's another thing to be resourceful and say, oh, you asked for this type of paper. You know what, if you got this kind of paper, you might be able to save some money or something like that. And reliable, of course, means that you are responsive and resourceful and so forth. So there were these dimensions, and again, these were already part of your DNA. So it wasn't like we were creating something new, but it was the beginning of a story.
Exactly, and it really took all of the examples you used and really funneled them together into something that everybody could get behind. It didn't have anything specific behind it because it didn't need to be specific, because everybody knew what it meant.
Right. So I love that. I love the statement. It makes me very happy because it's been a year plus now, I think, since you rolled it out to your employees. And as we wrap up this segment, talk a little bit about how you brought this program to life with your employees.
So one of the things that I was very adamant about was slow and steady and focusing on employees first, realizing that anything that we do, the employees have to buy into, and that it was more than just a marketing scheme that we were doing. It wasn't a scheme. This was something that was built into the fabric of who we were. And if we're going to bring this to our customers, they really needed to believe in it. So we spent an awful lot of time thinking through, how are we going to launch this internally? What does it mean internally, and how do we make that real? So one of the first things that we did was we activated the first ever employee recognition program at Case Paper, and it was aptly named On the Case.
Oh my gosh, wow.
The OTC Awards, as we shortened it up.
Right.
And really, it became something that, one of the things that I've learned over time is to take a back seat a little bit. I want to build an environment where other people can grow and other people can bring their ideas to the table. So actually the employees, 15 employees across all divisions, from plain employees to CSRs, salespeople, 15 people came together and built this program.
Love it.
So employees built it. It was built for them, by them. And that was a big part of On the Case. And they really had an opportunity to shape it, of like, what is this going to look like and how's it going to operate? So we just launched that. And the way we went about doing this was anybody can nominate anybody for going above and beyond for a customer or a fellow employee. And the nomination process is super simple. It's your name, their name, the division that they work at, right? The basics. But then what's their story? What's their On the Case story?
Right.
And what we're finding already is that we're getting this pouring in of these amazing stories that I couldn't even, I'm the CMO, and I'm going to admit on this podcast,
right,
I couldn't tell these stories better than they could.
Right.
They own it. And so now they own On the Case, and now they're morphing it, and they're changing it, and they're adding to it, and there's so much color and dimension that's being built to it, because it's not just something that I'm writing and giving out and they're reciting and memorizing. Each one of them are personally connected to On the Case because they have their own story about it. And that's what makes it powerful, that's what makes it real, and that's how you get buy-in. It's not just some BS. Right. It's real, and they built it. All I had to do was build a mechanism to make it happen.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the other things that you've done to be on the case with On the Case. Oh, that's meta.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
All right, we're back, and my guest remains Simon from Case Paper, and we were talking about bringing on the case to life, and you've done it with employees with the On the Case Awards. Let's talk about some of the other things. I mean, I know because we did a lot of the work, there was some kind of rebranding that you did, and you broke a rule, which is you never mess with your logo. You did some cool things. Let's talk about how also you wanted to send some signals to employees that this was because so far it's mainly employees, with the branding of that.
So it could be taboo to say this on a podcast to other CMOs, but I would venture a guess that we've all made mistakes in the past. And I think that when it came to rebranding, we went through this process about 6 or 7 years ago. And before I joined CMO Club and other organizations and really learned, I didn't quite put a lot of the pieces together. So it's not just a logo, it's not just a new ad, it's not just a new fresh look, that there needs to be a lot of substance behind it. So now that we built a really good foundation of substance, then it was to bring it to life with things that were more visible, getting into both customers and of course with the employees as well. So you mentioned humor. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of fun coming up with slogans. And what became just like the employee recognition program is that once we set forth kind of where we were headed, it was amazing how many employees would then call me or email or even text me being like, I have another idea. How about this line? How about that line? And so we got things like, we give a sheet. Mm-hmm. Sheet happens here. We sell sheets of paper. For those of you who don't know, yeah. Of course. So we had a lot of fun with it. And then we started bringing it to life with truck wraps. Mm. So we're in our markets that we're in. So if you are in Miami, Philadelphia, High Point, North Carolina, LA, Chicago, or drive on the turnpike frequently in New Jersey, you will start seeing these trucks. And one thing you'll notice is they are absurd and not like any truck you'll see on the road. And part of it was really owning it. We are a paper company. Let's have some fun with ourselves here.
Right.
We aren't saving lives. There are doctors that save lives. We appreciate those doctors. We're a paper company, right? And I do find that paper and the things that we do and our customers do are actually really great and very important, but sure. We're also a paper company. So we have truck wraps, we had new slogans, we started doing new premiums, we started printing on our own paper, but having a lot more fun with what we were doing with it. It wasn't just a product specification sheet. Now it was something more. And taking delight in the fact that in our space, everybody's doing the same thing.
Right.
So where are the areas where you could have fun, do something different?
Right.
And so we really started saying, well, what does on the case mean to us in our department? And on the case means is, here's what doing the basics would be. This is just doing the work. And here's how we would go above and beyond in the marketing space. And so we do take a lot of opportunity to add delight, whether it's footers and emails, right? Whether it's locations, whether it's just really finding places where we can add some absurd humor or something that's a little irreverent to just lighten up and just delight our employees and our customers.
Yeah, I seem to recall there are elephants in your signature. I mean, what's up with that?
Yes, we have elephants.
Dogs.
And dogs. And
everybody loves dogs.
That is universal.
It's true, but I don't know about elephants. Everybody love elephants?
They will now. I think that surprisingly, yes, people have been very excited about the elephants, and employees get to choose some of the characters they can have in their email signatures. So there's some choice here, and a lot of people chose the elephant.
Interesting, yeah, and I think that's kind of cool that you it wasn't on the case as an idea, it's not one image, it's not one thing. But so if you were imagining an email signature, and we'll link to it, I think, in the show notes, but imagine an email signature where you see the name, but there's actually like an elephant holding the above the case in case paper logo. So you actually see this sort of integrated artwork. It's all of a sudden, there's a certain whimsy, I would say, to your brand that you've embraced. And your employees have fully embraced it.
Absolutely. They've embraced it. I think some people, when it comes to humor, you can't make everybody happy.
Right.
But I think we do a pretty good job at towing the line between, maybe going too far, or in some cases,
right.
maybe not far enough.
Right.
We'll see where this goes.
So, and you have been working on, and I assume it's okay that we talk about this amazing 75th anniversary album and this thing, which is just coming off the press, and it's a stunning piece of work. And one of the things that, again, for me, that I like so much about that kind of thing is the medium's the message.
Absolutely.
And so talk a little bit about that piece and why you did it, and sort of the celebration of being 75 and how to walk the fine line there between, you're 75 years old and you're the new company that can help them with their current needs. Absolutely.
So there's a lot of humor in this album, of course. That shouldn't be shocking to the listeners after this long, but we definitely added a lot of elements where we were putting different papers in there, and we were doing a lot of things structurally that are pretty unique. But the whole concept of the album was telling a story of 75 years through the lens of what have we done to surprise and delight our customers for those 75 years? How have we come through for them over those years? Some of you might be listening, might have been around when this happened, when the Beatles landed in New York City. We did a tremendous amount of work for our customers that were printing on demand for that big event, and the amount of printing that kept going because of it. And there's stories that live on at Case Paper about these almost cultural events, and how we were there for it, and we were there to help make it happen, whether it was a program, what was it, at Shea Stadium?
Yes.
Now the City Field, but the old Shea Stadium.
The old Shea Stadium.
And stories like that, where we could really connect our customers to both history and stories that relate to, this is not something we just started in the last year on the case. We've been on the case for 75 years, right. And really telling those stories throughout this album, and really telling about who we are, as well as showing different papers and structurally showing some interesting printing methods. And I was lucky enough, and Jessica, who's here with me, on her first ever press check. And I do recommend to you marketers that if you are involved in your print spend at all, get out of your office, get off your butt, and go to a press check. It is a lot of fun. It'll open your eyes to that world. And you should at least experience that once in your life. It is really a truly amazing experience. So talk to your print partners and get in there. It's really fun.
So you have this plan, you have the on the case as an idea, purpose-driven story statement. And then we did the plan on a page, and 6 things you could execute against employees, 6 things for customers, and six things for prospects. And this is very much of a work in progress. So, but still, you've done enough now to sort of know what do you think the biggest lessons for you so far, as you've sort of in many ways, you've rebranded the organization. You've given them a North Star. You've given them language to describe the North Star. What are some of the lessons that that other CMOs might be able to glean from this?
Well, how do I say this without sounding like I'm really, really lazy? But empower your people and your employees to carry that message. There's something to be said about building an infrastructure that's sustainable, that's something that your employees can grab hold of and run with. And so now all of a sudden, instead of me doing all the work, they're naturally doing the work. Oh. They're carrying that message, they're developing their stories, they're telling the story, and they're telling in a way that's consistent with our brand, because we spent the time up front getting their buy-in by making them a part of the process.
Right.
And so that probably, more than anything, is something that I've learned through this process, and I'm trying to bring to other aspects, both in marketing and other aspects of the business, is empower your employees to be a part of the decision making. At some point, we all have to make decisions, but things like this, their ideas and their buy-in, their support, you don't have to take every one of their ideas, but you encourage them to be a part of it.
Sure.
Because your best ideas aren't going to come from you. Your best ideas are going to come from other people.
Right.
Your job is to help make those ideas real.
Right.
And that's a really exciting part of this.
And it's interesting as I'm hearing you talk, because one of the things that we did this B2B CMO survey, 110 respondents, and when I asked them, or we asked them, how long did they all believe that employee activation before a launch of a new campaign are important, but when I asked them how long they gave it, it was like 60% gave less than a month. and part of it is that there's this, hey, we've got this new campaign and we got to get it to market because that's the deadline. You've taken a fair amount of time to do that, and I really think it's meaningful. And this is the difference between what I call coat of paint marketing, where you just, if you rebrand, but all you're doing is just saying, hey, we're purple now, and you put paint on the outside. Something is real, like a commitment to extreme customer satisfaction and customer delight. For that to be real takes a lot of time. And even though it was part of the organization, there were things that you needed to do and get people involved in before you could go to the marketplace and say, hey, we're on the case, right? And I think that's a big lesson there, and it's so important. But take the time to get your brand right, and that I think you need to do. Like, you've done an employee survey, you made them feel involved, and as the pieces of the brand got rolled out, you gave them options to choose from, and now they get to participate in the idea after the fact. I think there's sort of a big difference between, there are some folks who will sort of in-source like their tagline. I think that's problematic personally. I don't think you're going to get to on the case by doing a, hey, what do you think we should be? Because it takes so long to rationalize something like that and build a full structure on it. Of course, this is what we do for a living, so I'm going to rationalize it. But I think that this is sort of the role of employees in this process is important. And so one of the things that we did differently, this is sort of being honest on, is that in our process with Simon, we didn't do the employee survey until a little bit later than we should have, but now we do it standard right up front, because we want them to know that they're part of the process. And just by asking, it's amazing what happens. And you had good feedback on your employee survey.
We had phenomenal feedback.
Yeah.
I think we were all actually pretty shocked. We knew we had passionate employees and people who cared, but I think what it showed us, at least, was there's a lot of support. Right. And incidentally, part of our plan, and this is a little bit harder to do with every company, is we had to align incentives to align itself with what we were trying to build. So I am a very, very big proponent of core values and culture of an organization. And you can imagine, as a 75-year-old company, when you're a startup, right, you start with a nucleus of 4 employees and you build outward. The way I describe Case Paper is we were kind of like not a blob, but we were kind of like, we needed some shaping, we needed some forming. We had a strong nucleus, but we really had to shape it, because for 75 years it went astray a little bit, and core values was not front and center. And what On the Case really brought was an opportunity to bring core values in, because being on the case is very much tied to who we are and the culture that we want to build. So we needed to make sure that our incentive structure was aligned with it. So working with the CEO, the CFO, and some other key members of the executive team was also refiguring a structure that hasn't really changed much in 30 years. And if you think about it, that's not as popular as doing big funny humor marketing. But even through that process of engaging the employees, getting their feedback, the firm we used to work with on that was, their comment to me was, it's refreshing. I haven't been in a scenario where we found that all the employees, before they said anything to us and made any critiques about anything, was, how loyal they were about the company and how much they were passionate about the company, and then they laid into us. But you know what? If you start from a foundation of caring and trying to do the right thing, most of those other things take care of themselves. Right. But there's definitely that to make this real. It's not just one thing you do; it's doing all of these things somewhat at the same time. Some things in sequence. But there's definitely some behind the scenes things that I would say that we're also working on to make this even more impactful.
So find your purpose, involve employees heavily, recognize that once you find your purpose that you have to make it real, and you got to do a lot to make it real. This takes time. And as I was thinking and hearing you talk, why isn't this a conversation that I have more often on the show? And I think part of the reason is you're a private company. And so you will take the time to do it right. You don't have the pressure of quarterly earnings.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you think about it, and I empathize with people that are in that scenario because there is a different mentality there. But I think that if you take the time to build an infrastructure that when you do have something new, that you can deploy it because you've already built the buy-in and you can deploy people to kind of take that on, that's really what I went back to the drawing board with is that to make this real, if I'm driving this all the time with 300 employees, I can't do that by myself.
Pause.
No problem.
Okay, we had a little break in our audio system. So, okay, start again. All right, so we're wrapping this up for our CMOs who are so grateful that they've spent the time with us today. I think I've already summarized a lot of but do you have any sort of, sometimes I like to ask 2 do's and a don't for your fellow CMOs. One do is obviously get employees involved. Do you have another do?
Think about the process of how you get things done and try to filter that through. So that when you do have new campaigns, right, you have a process that you can rely on to get that quick buy-in and the employees around it very quickly. If you don't have the time to spend to do a lot of engagement around a new campaign, so the work you do up front will pay off dividends in the future. And so I have a couple examples, but I don't. Okay.
Sure. Why not? Go for it. Give me an example.
So when we started doing our On the Case and we talked about doing posters to promote the program, we had plan employees, hourly workers, some even in unions, stepping up saying, I have an idea for the poster, unsolicited. And their ideas were actually really funny. And so we ran with them.
There you go.
And so there's an example of, well, we could sit here and try to do all this creative work, but at the end of the day, this was internal.
Right.
It didn't need all that fanciness to it. And in fact, the fact that it came from employees only deeper rooted what we were trying to accomplish within the organization. So getting their feedback on even things like that with a design idea. We even have some people that are designers that have already on their own just say, hey, what do you think of this? I've just did this on my spare time.
It's cool. They're on the case.
They're on the case. They're on the case on doing On the Case.
Any don'ts? One don't for your fellow CMOs.
One don't.
Yeah, we got 2 do's. We really had more than that, but.
Stop using the term millennial.
That's a fresh one. Why?
The term millennial comes with so much baggage to it.
It does, doesn't it?
And it's such a loaded term. And I see Jessica, who's probably on the younger end of the millennial generation, nodding her head over there. I think we're all sick of it. And I think that there's a difference between millennials, different age groups, there's cuspers. But I think more importantly is that everybody wants to feel valued. Everybody wants to feel empowered. And it doesn't matter if you're a 78-year-old or if you're a 22-year-old starting out your career. Everybody wants to feel appreciated and everybody wants to feel valued and everybody wants to give an opportunity to grow and take ownership of something. It's not just millennials that want that.
Right.
So stop using the word millennial and focus more on your people and focus more on the marketing that you're doing and how that can empower them to take it on and become advocates for you, because it's a lot better when you have a small marketing department or even if a large marketing department, when you have 340 employees that I consider as part of my marketing department. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, that's awesome. That really is, it's true. There was one last thing I was just thinking about on the case, and I wanted folks to understand. The interesting thing about this idea, and it reminds me a little bit of one of our clients, UTAC and Control Freaks, and actually the CMO of that show, of that company, was on the show. And one of the things we talked about Control Freaks, it wasn't just that employees were control freaks in your case that were on the case. It is that you are enabling your customers to be on the case, because your customers actually are they're printing stuff for other customers. And so I just wanted to spend one last idea, because sometimes when you get into the storytelling world, there is a tendency to say, oh, we're the star of the show, it's our brand and we're excited. And there was room in this idea for you to pass it and sort of share it.
Absolutely. So where we're taking this is really, first we're starting internally to build that foundation, but the next step is actually to really our customers. I mean, most of the times us being on the case is because they have short deadlines. They don't have 2 weeks to do a job anymore. When something happens in the marketplace, and some of you who are listening might even be the ones that are pushing the buttons here, right? They make a decision. By the time it filters down to the print provider or the print service provider that you're using, they don't have time.
Right.
So they need a reliable partner who's going to have product on the floor that can deliver things quickly and also present new, different papers and even just, opportunities to add to the marketing budget by doing custom sizes. So all of that brings value to them, but ultimately they are doing that all for their customers.
Right.
And all we're doing is making that process easier, quicker, more seamless, and along the way making them both financially stronger, but also making their platform and their service to their customers stronger.
There you go. What a perfect place to wrap up this show. Simon, first of all, thank you so much for coming into the studio. For those folks watching it on video, hey.
Thank you.
To Jessica and our audience, big round of applause for you, yay. And so thank you again. Really a pleasure talking with you. Been really fun working with you. And to the listeners, I get a chance, I'm looking at the camera right now, but most of you are on audio. First, if you enjoyed the show, be on the case and share it with your friends, or be on the case by, say, writing a review. That would be awesome, because we welcome those and always welcome senior marketers into our audience. And until next week, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.